at the tender age of 22, fresh out of Yale, I decided that I wanted to change the world. And that the best way for me to do that was to buy a one-way ticket to Nicaragua and go off and join the revolution. This was 1983. So off I went, thinking I would stay for a year or two. I ended up staying for 11. I was 22 years old when I went away. I was 33 when I came home. And I spent that time living in some of the most remote mountain communities that you could imagine, working with farmers, organizing co-ops, training farmers in business skills and agricultural skills. And it was amazing, right? For a wannabe revolutionary cowboy from Austin, Texas, to be able to wear blue jeans and cowboy boots every day and ride horses and motorbikes up into the mountains and eat rice and beans 3 times a day for 11 years. That was pretty cool. But the work grew frustrating. And then it grew disillusioning. Because what I was doing was working on one well-intentioned international aid project after another, designed by very well-intentioned, smart people sitting in cities around the global north, sending millions of well-intentioned dollars to alleviate poverty. And in my experience, more often than not, we failed. We failed to help people on the ground in the communities develop their own capacity to solve their own problems. I think more often than not, we simply recreated dependency on aid. And so I became very disillusioned. And then in 1990, after 7 years in the field, quite by accident, I discovered these crazy people in Europe who called themselves fair traders and whose slogan was trade, not aid, and whose motto was to support sustainable development and better livelihoods for farmers by buying direct and paying a better price. So armed with this very powerful idea, I went off into the hills again and spent months telling farmers about it and trying to recruit people to this new idea. And after all that work, I was only able to put together a very small cooperative of 20 people, Nicaragua's very first fair trade coffee co-op. And with 20 farmers, we had enough coffee to fill 1 container. And we shipped that container in the summer of 1990 to a fair trade buyer in England. And a few months later, we got back our money, and after cost, we had $1 per pound for our farmers, for their coffee. At a time when the local middleman was paying 10 cents a pound. We got our farmers $1. Well, you can imagine how excited people were. Overnight, my new nickname became Pablo $1. I was a very popular guy. And over the next couple of years, we organized 3,000 families all over northern Nicaragua into this co-op that was receiving coffee and processing, adding value, and exporting direct. And by virtue of this dramatically higher revenue, we were able to do amazing things that previously we probably would have depended on government or well-intentioned NGOs to come and do for us, or not. So we kept farmers on the land. Our farmers were able to eat 3 times a day instead of once or twice. We started scholarship programs to keep kids in high school, because high school's still a luxury in so many rural, developing world villages. We rebuilt schools. We ran health programs. We started the first organic certification program in the country, and by virtue of organic certification, we got our farmers more money. We invested in quality. We taught farmers to smell and to taste their own coffee, and by virtue of the improved quality, we got our farmers more money. We invested in infrastructure. We invested in productivity. We did all this stuff. So much progress in economic and social terms. And none of it thanks to anyone's charity. And I'm not saying there isn't a role for charity, but none of this was made possible through international aid. It was all made possible thanks to this really potent, powerful idea of a fair price for a great product. And so, of course, the invisible dividend around all of this for our farmers was hope and pride and dignity and a sense of self-reliance that only comes when you do it for yourself. As you can imagine, my 4 years at the helm of this co-op were transformational, not only for all the folks that I worked with, but for me. It totally changed my perspective on sustainable development and on markets. I mean, up until that point, I was a proud anti-capitalist. I thought markets were the problem. And that experience opened my eyes to the reality that markets are the most powerful force for change that we could hope to have. And that partnerships with responsible companies and conscious consumers could quite likely be the most effective model for empowering the poor on a journey out of poverty. So then I had this huge identity crisis because I was living the life. I was having a great time. I'd married the most beautiful gal in town. I had a Nicaraguan kid. Why would I want to come back to the States? Why would I want to come home? But fair trade at that point was booming in Europe, and there was nothing happening in the US. And so a growing sense of obligation became a sense of calling, and I realized I had to come home. So for me, Haas was homecoming. I came home to Haas. Of all the business schools that I looked at and applied to, this was the place that I chose to come to, and it was the best fit for me that I could imagine. Not just for the tools that I got here, the progressive values of this place made me feel at home. Coming from a revolutionary environment and 11 years in the field, I felt at home here. And you know what? Dear Fran Van Loo, and John Freeman's entrepreneurship class had such an impact on me. I wrote the business plan for Fair Trade USA in John's entrepreneurship class. And of course, this was 94 to 96, so this was a time when the internet was just starting to boom, and so many of my classmates were dreaming up entrepreneurial ventures. And so while no one really talked about social entrepreneurship, I felt in good company with people who wanted to do crazy stuff and who wanted to change the world. So I got out in 96. I started Fair Trade USA in 98, thinking I would do it for a couple of years and go right back to the mountains of Nicaragua, where I belong. And here I am. We just celebrated our 15th anniversary. And Fair Trade USA is a nonprofit organization, a 501c3 nonprofit, mission-driven organization. But we sit at the hub of the fair trade, the broader fair trade community. So we don't buy or sell products. We certify. We audit and certify products and companies that do. Today we work with more than 800 great brands and retailers, from Walmart and Starbucks to mom and pop local companies as well. We now certify 40 different product categories, from coffee and chocolate to flowers, and now increasingly manufactured products. We just launched apparel with Patagonia. We have 40% consumer awareness of our label. 40% of American adults have seen the Fair Trade Certified label, and about half say they've bought Fair Trade products in the last month. We work now with almost 2 million farming families in 60 countries around the world. And we are helping to change lives together with our partners for those families every day. And when I say we, I mean you too, because every time we choose a fair trade cup of coffee or banana or chocolate bar when we shop, we are helping keep kids in school and help keeping families on a road out of poverty. So clearly, I'm a nonprofit guy, but I live in the world of business, and my ability to do that is directly related to my experience here, to the tools, to the networks, and to the inspiration that I got as a student. And so, what better stage for me to be talking on than this one today.